Welcome to no sleep, where the night never ends, and every whisper in the dark could be something real. Tonight's story isn't just horror. It's a memory, a warning, a door that should have stayed closed. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't fall asleep. The first time I heard about the curse, I was 12 and sitting on a folding chair that pinched my thighs. My uncle's coffin was up front, a polished slice of mahogany reflecting the ceiling fans. Grown-ups whispered in a way that wasn't grief. It was accounting. They kept saying, "Who's next?" like there was a wait list. When we got home, I cornered my mom at the kitchen sink. She was still wearing the black dress she only took out for weddings and funerals. And lately, mostly funerals. At the church, I said. People were talking about a next one. Next what? She stared at the dishwater as if it might give her a gentler answer. "I suppose you're old enough," she said finally. "Our family has a pattern, a curse, if you want to be dramatic. Whenever someone dies, 2 more follow before the year's out. It doesn't have to be blood. Marriage counts. It's always 3. I laughed because that's what you do when a parent tries to hand you something heavy. Like, always. She didn't say yes. She didn't have to. Her knuckles went white around the sponge, and I could see all the funerals her hands had held. Grandpa had died last month, after a life of ignoring doctors the way stubborn men ignore speed limits. Now, Uncle Ray, who didn't drink, didn't do drugs, who told the world's worst dad jokes despite not being a dad, was dead because a traffic light malfunctioned and turned green in 4 directions at once. The cops called it a freak. My family called it 1 and 2. Who decides the 3rd? I asked. Like the curse was a board game and I just needed to learn the rules. No one decides, Mom said. Not us, anyway. And it's never gone after a child. That I know. Not comforting. I tried to logic my way out of it. We were a big family. Big families attend more funerals. Confirmation bias. Coincidence. The human brain is a pattern-eating animal. I repeated those lines until they sounded like prayer, but prayer has a way of rotting when you listen too closely. December came on like a held breath. The air got thin, the daylight got small, and our house learned to count. 3 knocks in the morning mail, 3 rings of the phone that mysteriously stopped on its own, 3 clicks when the heater kicked on. I told myself it meant nothing. Meanwhile, my aunt, the one who smelled like eucalyptus and kept hard candies in every pocket, died in her sleep at 93 with her rosary in her hand. At the funeral, my cousins cried and the older folks exhaled that complicated exhale people do when mercy wins around. "See," Mom said softly in the car back. "Sometimes the 3rd is ready." That should have settled it. But once you've looked at a magic eye poster and the hidden picture pops out, you don't unsee the dolphin. After that year, the rule wasn't a myth. It was a calendar we lived inside. Every January felt like a reset. Every obituary a countdown. I grew up under that shadow and pretended it was shade. When other kids learned their times tables, I learned the math of grief. You carry the 1. You always carry the 1. By high school, I had a system. I kept a ledger in my head like a bookmaker tracking bets. If the first death came early, there was a long season of holding your breath. If it came late, you sprinted through bad days and hope got shin splints. I learned the difference between sympathy and superstition too. The former brings casseroles, the latter brings gossip. We had both, and too much of the second. Then I watched the rule bend without breaking. My cousin Sarah died in spring. A disease she'd fought since she could walk finally decided it wanted all of her. That was one. Early summer, an uncle I'd only met twice went in his garden and didn't come back out. That was two. The grown-ups murmured about three, like the way you murmur grace before meals. My dad's heart found a way to scare us in August. He collapsed in the driveway. The ER lights made his skin look like wax fruit. He survived. Machines cajoled him back into rhythm, and I thought, stupidly, selfishly, we cheated it. The family didn't cheer. They worried out loud. Did the rule adjust? Would it punish? Would it take two more to balance out the one that wriggled off the hook? We made it to December without the third, until we didn't. My great aunt slipped on black ice outside church and broke her neck with the neatness of a snapped twig. The relief that rippled through the wake was uglier than grief. No one said we're safe, but everyone breathed like it. Dad lived to see January. The lesson I took, incorrect, dangerous, was that if you can outrun a dog to the fence, the dog stops. You're fine. You can walk slow again after Dad's funeral years later, because the fence turns out to be a part of the yard. The counting started on my mother's face before she spoke. Grief on top of grief is a math problem you can recite in your sleep. Grandma died a month after him, a stroke taking the part of her that still remembered the shape of his name. That year obeyed the rule so cleanly that even the skeptics in me got quiet. We didn't move across the country to start fresh. We fled. Same difference. We told ourselves distance is a vaccine. For a while, the lie held. 10 quiet years. Weddings that stayed weddings, not foreshadowing. Babies who were just babies, not future eulogies. I got through nursing school and learned to talk about death like a professional, which is a polite way of saying I learned to box it up and carry it down a hall. Then someone on my mom's side went, and someone else followed. And Mom packed a suitcase to watch Grandpa for a bit, her voice doing that too bright thing. Just until the holidays pass, she said, not meeting my eyes. I don't want the shock to be too much. That curse isn't ours, I said. That's Dad's family's mess. I meant don't leave me, but I said it like a joke so it wouldn't sound like fear. It isn't real, she agreed quickly, but shock is. She left anyway, which is what people do when they're trying to dodge a train they swear they don't believe is coming. That was when my brother's kids brought home a monster with a soft name. A bug, a cold, 2 snotty noses, a cough that barked at midnight, a fever that tinted cheeks apple red. My brother's immune system was a house where the alarms never worked, so I came every night after shift, armed with soup and pulse oximeters, and the smug arrogance nurses grow from being the last person standing when everyone else is sick. A week later, they were on the upswing, and I wasn't. The fever slid in like a knife you don't see until the warmth pours out. 103.8. My skin went scarlet across my chest and face, like shame spreading. I swallowed Tylenol and told myself it would break by morning. I wrote a text to Mom and erased it. I lay down with a shiver that felt rehearsed. Somewhere in the house, the heater clicked on. Once, twice, 3 times. I told myself it was metal expanding. I told myself this wasn't that kind of story. And the dark leaned in, patient as a bookie, to see if I'd pay what was owed. The sickness didn't feel like a flu. It felt like a betrayal. It came fast, the way a shadow spreads when the sun ducks behind a cloud. One moment I was a nurse off shift, tired but fine. The next I was curled on my mattress, ribs shaking as though something inside was practicing a rhythm I didn't know. My brother texted me at dawn. Kids are better. Wife's better. You. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. I didn't answer. Not because I couldn't, but because every response I thought of sounded like a confession. I think the curse picked me. The fever climbed. I sweated through sheets, then froze in the damp. My skin flushed in irregular blotches, hot and stinging, as if the hands I couldn't see were pressing against me. My throat swelled until every swallow was an argument. I knew the vitals. 103, 104. Dangerous territory. I should have gone to the ER. I should have called an ambulance. But I didn't want to die in a hospital bed with latex gloves pulling curtains closed. I wanted to die, if I had to, in my own room where at least the ghost belonged to me. Besides, part of me was already counting. Grandpa, uncle, aunt, dad, grandma, cousins, uncles. It always stacked in threes, and I wondered, not in dread, but in grim arithmetic, if I was simply filling a slot. By the third night, the fever broke into hallucination. I thought I saw my father in the chair by the window, the oxygen tube still in his nose, his shirt sweat-stained like it had been the day his heart gave out. He didn't speak. He only held up 3 fingers, slow and deliberate, before fading with the dawn light. I told myself it was the fever, but fever dreams don't know family secrets. The whispers started again, too. My relatives are good at whispers, the kind you half hear through doors, through static, through the wet hush of snow falling on a roof. My phone lit with messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. How's your brother holding up? Any news from your side? Tell us if you hear anything. They weren't asking after my health. They were asking for math updates. Who would be the third? I stopped checking my voicemail when I heard one cousin sobbing, saying, "It's her, isn't it?" On the 4th day, my fever spiked so high my vision bent at the edges. The digital clock warped into threes, 3:33 a.m., 3:33 p.m., even when it wasn't. My own breathing counted itself, stuttering on the 3rd exhale like it wanted to remind me. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was feeding the superstition like gasoline into a fire. But then came the noises from the hallway. Not footsteps, not voices, knocks. 3. Always 3. Sometimes soft, like knuckles wrapped in cloth. Sometimes sharp, like bones wrapping wood. Each time I pulled myself to the door, there was nothing but the dark. I tried to journal because that's what the rational part of me thought a nurse should do. Track symptoms, keep notes, prove it was just illness. But the words didn't stay where I put them. The fever shook my hand so badly that the sentences collapsed into jagged marks, 3 lines repeating over and over, until the page looked less like language and more like tally marks scratched into a prison wall. When I woke from another delirious half-sleep, I found 3 notebooks stacked neatly on the desk. I only owned one. By the end of the week, I stopped fighting the thought. Maybe I was the third. Maybe it had always been me, and yet, some terrible part of me began to hope it wasn't, because if I died now, the curse would reset, and my brother, his wife, his children, any of them, could be caught in the next triad. If I lived, maybe it would skip. Maybe it would balance. That was the cruelest part. The curse made every choice into betrayal. Die and abandon them. Live and invite it, to climb higher up the family tree. The fever broke on the 8th day, just like that. I woke soaked and weak, but my temperature was back in human territory. For a moment, I thought I had escaped. I opened the blinds, let the sunlight sting my eyes, and whispered thanks to no one. But then my phone buzzed. A cousin's number. I didn't want to answer, but I did. "Did you hear?" she asked, voice shaking. "Uncle Greg, he collapsed this morning. Massive stroke. They said he was gone before he hit the ground." Her words rang in my ear like a bell struck 3 times. Uncle Greg? That made me too. And suddenly, I wasn't sure whether the fever had spared me or simply saved me for last. Uncle Greg's funeral was held on a gray morning that smelled of damp stone. The church pews groaned beneath the weight of relatives who didn't want to be there but couldn't afford to stay home. Funerals in my family were less about grief and more about math. You could feel it in the air. Everyone silently calculating who would complete the 3. The priest spoke about Greg's generosity, his humor, his untimely passing. The words slid off the congregation like water on wax. No one was listening. They were watching each other. I caught glances passing down the pews like contraband. Old eyes measuring young bodies, cousins measuring aunts, everyone waiting for the tally to settle. And me, sitting there sweating under my black blouse, wondering if I should just stand up and volunteer. Pick me, end it here. But curses don't bargain. They only collect. After the burial, whispers bloomed like mold in the corners of the cemetery. I pretended not to hear, but my ears caught enough. She was sick last week. Fever took her red. Wouldn't that be merciful, to have it done? I realized with a twist in my gut that they were talking about me. I left early, walking away from the grave while the others still lingered. The wind pressed at my back like a hand urging me forward. I didn't look behind me. At home, I tried to ignore the rhythm. The heater still clicked in 3s. The fridge motor hummed 3 times before falling silent. Even the neighbor's dog barked in perfect triads, as though mocking me. I told myself it was my mind looking for patterns. But what about the knocks? The ones on my door at 3 a.m., always 3, always leaving no one on the other side. One night, I placed a chair against the door, childish, desperate. The knocks still came. The chair rattled with each one. I sat on the floor with my arms around my knees, counting along with the sound like a child reciting multiplication tables. When the 3rd knock faded, I sobbed with relief, until a 4th came, then silence. A reminder, the rules belong to it, not me. The dread bled into daylight. At work, I couldn't listen to the monitors without hearing the curse. Beep, 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 flatline. 3 quick sounds before silence. Even my patients noticed my shaking hands, my 2 long stares. "You okay, nurse?" they asked. I smiled a lie. But when I hung IV bags, I noticed a cruel detail. The drip rate always stabilized at 3 per beat. I adjusted valves, I swapped lines, but the rhythm returned every time. Like the curse had found me even here, at my job, mocking the science I clung to. The final straw came in a dream, or maybe it wasn't a dream. I was back in the church, the same pews, the same coffin at the front. Only this time, the coffin was open, and I could see myself inside. Not sick, not rotting, just lying there with folded hands and a face emptied of fight. Around me, the congregation chanted, low and steady, a sound like breath turned into language. I strained to listen and realized they weren't speaking words. They were counting. 1, 2, 3, over and over. until the sound filled my chest like smoke. I woke up gasping, sheets twisted around my legs. My throat was raw from screaming. The next day, Mom called from my grandfather's house. Her voice was taut, like stretched wire. "He's not doing well," she said. "Ever since Greg, he's gone downhill fast. He won't eat. He won't sleep. I'm worried." I bit my lip until I tasted blood. Grandpa would make 3. It should have brought relief. It didn't, because some part of me whispered that it wouldn't stop with him, that maybe the curse wasn't content with clean arithmetic anymore. "Don't let him be alone," I said, surprising myself with how sharp it came out. "Not even for a minute." Mom hesitated. "You sound like you believe it now." I wanted to deny it, to laugh, but all I said was, "Just stay with him." That night, I heard footsteps in the hall outside my apartment. 3 steps, a pause, 3 more. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under my bed, heart hammering. When I yanked the door open, the hallway was empty, but on the floor lay 3 folded pieces of paper, stacked neatly. I picked them up with shaking hands. Each page had the same phrase scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting. "The third is not enough." The next morning, Grandpa was gone. In his sleep, quiet, the way people pray for. The family sighed relief. Another cycle closed. I should have felt it too. Instead, I stared at the 3 pages on my table, the words burning themselves into my skull. The third is not enough. For the first time, I realized the rule might not be a law. It might just be a leash, and maybe, just maybe, it was starting to slip. Grandpa's funeral felt different. It wasn't the grief, it was the relief. The family stood around the casket like gamblers cashing out chips. There were hugs, shaky laughter, even comments like, "At least it's over now." The curse had collected its 3. The year could crawl to a close. But I couldn't join their sighs. Not with the 3 pieces of paper burning a hole in my purse. The third is not enough. That night, while everyone else gathered at my aunt's house to eat casseroles and drink weak coffee, I went home and spread the papers on my desk. They weren't in my handwriting. The ink was uneven, rushed, the strokes digging into the page as if the writer's hand had been forced. I didn't remember writing them, but I couldn't escape the feeling that they had come through me. The following week, the silence was louder than the funerals had been. My phone barely buzzed. The whispers stopped. No one dared mention the curse, as though silence could seal it shut. My relatives clung to superstition like duct tape, hoping their belief in its ending would make it true. But patterns had already begun to slip. The dog across the street barked 4 times, then stopped. The heater clicked 5. My neighbor's wind chimes played a broken rhythm, not 3s, but something longer, something building. The math was breaking. At work, I caught myself staring at the heart monitor of a patient. Beep, 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 beep. A 4th tone where there should have been 3. The attending doctor adjusted the wires, frowning. "Strange interference," he muttered, like the machines picking up a signal. I felt my stomach drop because I recognized the cadence. It wasn't interference, it was counting. When I got home that night, I found another page slid under my door, the same jagged handwriting. 3 was mercy, 4 is hunger. My knees went weak. I sank against the door and read the line until it blurred. So it had never been a curse designed to take 3. 3 was only the minimum, a kindness, a leash. Something had decided it wanted more. The false relief in the family lasted exactly 2 weeks. Then came the phone call. My cousin Daniel had been found in his garage, collapsed beside his workbench. Stroke, the doctor said. He was 48, too young, too sudden. The whispers returned like vultures. This isn't how it's supposed to work. The 3 were already taken. It isn't following the rule. I didn't go to the funeral. I stayed home and waited. Because I knew Daniel wasn't 4. He was the beginning of something new. The next pages arrived faster after that. Always slid under my door, always in 3s, though the sentences changed. The rule was never yours. Mercy is over. You will learn to count higher. The handwriting was more frantic each time, as though the writer's hand was shaking. I stopped trying to deny it was mine. Fever or trance, sleepwalking or possession. I was the courier. The curse was speaking through me. Mom called me one night, her voice trembling. I don't understand. Your grandfather was supposed to be the 3rd. Everyone said, everyone felt that it was over. I wanted to tell her about the notes, about the counting, about how the curse was shifting its appetite. But the words stuck in my throat because admitting it would make it real. Instead, I said, "Don't be alone, ever. Promise me." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "You sound just like your father." That broke me, because Dad had been the one to fight, to deny, to resist, and still, the curse had dragged him under. The family clung to their math like children clutching blankets. "It can't go past 3, they said. It's always been 3. They spoke it like prayer, like bargaining. But the curse had already evolved. It didn't care what they believed. The night after Daniel's burial, I woke to footsteps outside my apartment door. Not 3 this time. Not even 4. 7. Each step landed heavy, like boots sinking into mud, until they stopped outside my door. I held my breath, clutching the bat with the hands that trembled too much to swing it. The silence that followed was worse than the knocks. By morning, another page waited under the door. This time, only 2 words. Keep counting. And so I did. Each time my phone rang with bad news. Each time another relative collapsed or wasted away. I counted. 4, 5, 6. The curse had shed its leash. It had become something else entirely. The worst part? It wasn't slowing down. The numbers started falling faster. At first, there had been weeks, sometimes months, between the deaths. Space to breathe, space to convince yourself it was coincidence. But now, they were tumbling like dominoes. After Daniel, there was Aunt May, slipped in her kitchen, fractured skull, gone before the paramedics even got the stretcher unfolded. 2 days later, Cousin Beth's car spun out on black ice. 1 week after that, Great Uncle Howard didn't wake up from his nap. 4, 5, 6. The funerals blurred together. Black dresses, black suits, black coffee, black soil. I stopped changing out of my mourning clothes. What was the point? It was all one endless service. The family kept arguing about the rules, their denial fraying with each burial. It's a fluke. It's just bad luck this year. God's testing us. But the murmurs grew softer each time, less conviction, more fear. They all knew. The leash had snapped. The math didn't matter anymore. I kept my mouth shut. What was I supposed to say? That the curse was using me as a chalkboard? That notes appeared under my door with handwriting I didn't remember writing? That every night I heard boots in the hallway, counting higher and higher? They would lock me up. They would say grief broke me. Maybe it had. I kept getting sick too. Not fever this time. Something deeper. Fatigue that left me hollowed. Nights where my chest rattled with whispers instead of breath. I'd wake up with sore muscles, as though I'd been walking all night. But my shoes were by the door, mud on their soles. I wasn't dreaming. I was moving. And always in the morning, more pages. The script jagged, frantic. 7 comes quickly. 8 waits by the door. 9 has already chosen. I burned them, tossed them into the sink, lit them with matches, watched them curl into black flakes. But the next day, 3 more would be waiting. The deaths kept coming. 7, 8, 9. We buried people I hadn't spoken to in years, second cousins, in-laws, names I barely remembered until I saw them carved in stone. The family tree was being harvested, branch by branch, and through it all, the counting inside my head grew louder, not whispered anymore, but chanted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The rhythm pounded in my skull, matched to my pulse, like it was trying to merge with me, like it was using my blood as a metronome. I stopped answering the phone, couldn't bear another call, but the world found ways to remind me. A headline on TV, local woman dies in freak accident. A coworker whispering, "Did you hear about so-and-so?" Every piece of news folded neatly into the sequence, like I'd been waiting for it. I felt complicit, as if my very awareness was fueling it. Each time I counted, each time I whispered the number under my breath, I gave it breath. And yet, I couldn't not count. The numbers rose in me like vomit. I had to let them out. The breaking point came when my brother called. His voice was cracked, exhausted. "The kids are sick again," he said. "High fever. Won't go down. I'm scared." My stomach turned to ice. The chant in my skull surged. 10, 10, 10. "No," I whispered. "Not them. Please, not them." He didn't hear me. He was too busy begging me to come help, the way I always had. "You're the nurse," he said, voice breaking. "You're the strong one, please." But I couldn't, because if I stepped into that house, if I so much as touched those children, I knew what number they would become. So I lied. "I'm sick too," I said. "I can't risk it." The silence on the line was worse than screaming. "You've changed," he said finally, then hung up. I sat on the floor, sobbing, chanting numbers through my tears. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, trying to stop before 10. But the curse didn't stop. That night, the boots came again, heavier this time, each step echoing through the hallway like a drum beat. 10. They stopped outside my door. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The knock came, loud enough to rattle the frame. Not 3 this time, not even 7. 10 knocks. I collapsed onto my knees, clutching my ears. But the sound was inside me now. My bones vibrated with it. My heartbeat stuttered to match it. And when it stopped, I found another page slid beneath the door. 10 was always you. I don't know what that means. Am I the 10th? The end? Or am I the anchor? The reason the numbers keep climbing? The next morning, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. My lips moved even when I was still, murmuring numbers, counting endlessly. The curse doesn't just kill, it uses. And I am starting to think it has been using me all along. I used to think the curse lived around us, like some fog that drifted through the family tree, smothering branches one by one. But I was wrong. It doesn't drift. It doesn't wander. It roots. and I was the soil. The counting never left my head now. It was no longer a chant I overheard in dreams or in the hollow of hospital monitors. It was my heartbeat, my breath, my voice when I wasn't speaking. I'd catch myself muttering in elevators, in grocery store aisles, in the silence before sleep. Not words, just numbers. Ascending, always ascending. A cashier once asked, "Sorry, what was that?" And I had to bite down hard on my tongue to stop. I tasted iron for hours. My body started to betray me in other ways. First, it was the twitch in my fingers, like they were practicing tally marks. I'd wake with pen lines across my palms, as if I'd been writing in my sleep. Then the bruises appeared. 3 neat circles along my ribs, then 4 along my thigh, then 5 along my collarbone, like fingerprints pressing me into the sequence. Worst of all were the whispers in my breath. I tried recording myself one night, hoping to prove it was all in my head. When I played it back, the sound was unmistakable. My exhale breaking into syllables, not words, but counts. A rasping chorus of my own lungs keeping score. 1, 2, 3. The voice wasn't outside anymore. It was threaded through my flesh, keeping its ledger in bone and blood. I stopped going to work. Nurses are supposed to heal, but I couldn't trust my hands not to bring the curse into every room. Every patient monitor would start to sync to me. Every IV drip would fall in the same rhythm. And every time I thought, don't let this one be next, the number surged in my mouth like vomit. Better to stay home. Better to quarantine myself, like a carrier of some plague no one could test for. The phone kept ringing. My mother, my brother, cousins. They wanted comfort or answers, or maybe just to hear whether my voice still sounded human. I let them go to voicemail. Their messages grew frantic. Please pick up. We need to talk about this. I can't do this alone. I wanted to answer, but the curse sat heavy in my throat, and I knew if I opened my mouth, it might not be me who answered. One night, exhaustion pinned me down, and I dreamt, or thought I dreamt, of my father again. He stood at the foot of my bed, pale, breath rattling the way it had in his final months. "You think it ends with you?" he asked, but his voice was doubled, like 2 people speaking through the same mouth. I tried to say yes, that maybe if I gave myself up, it would close the book, but the voice inside me answered for me, booming through my chest. Nothing ends, the count climbs. I woke choking, my own throat raw. My father was gone, but his smell lingered. Hospital antiseptic, stale sweat, copper. I started noticing changes in sound around me. The hum of the refrigerator no longer droned. It recited. The plumbing groaned in numbered syllables. Even the birds outside my window called in patterns that folded neatly into the ledger in my head. It wasn't just me anymore. The curse was leaking outward, feeding through me into the world, teaching everything around me to keep score. The papers kept appearing under my door. 3 at a time, always 3, though the numbers on them marched higher. 11 is chosen. 12 waits in silence. 13 is hungry. The handwriting looked more and more like mine. At first, I swore it wasn't, but denial has a shelf life. By now, I knew it was mine. My hand, guided by something else. My body wasn't just a vessel. It was a ledger. Every new number carved itself through me before claiming someone else, and I had begun to fear the numbers weren't just deaths. They were preparations. On the 14th night, I woke to find tally marks carved into my bedroom wall. Not drawn, carved. 3 vertical scratches crossed by a diagonal slash. The skin on my fingertips was raw, bleeding. I must have done it myself. I sobbed, pressing my back against the wall, as if I could hide from what I'd already done. But when I closed my eyes, I saw further tallies stretching into the dark. Hundreds, thousands. The count doesn't stop. The count never stops. I'm starting to wonder if it was never about 3. Not about mercy, not about balance. Maybe the curse was never counting the dead at all. Maybe it's counting through me. And when it reaches the right number, whatever number that is, I don't know if there will be anyone left to bury. The night I stopped fighting, the world finally went quiet. Not silent, just aligned. Every sound around me had fallen into step with the rhythm inside my head. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock, the beat of my own heart. No longer separate noises, but one endless count. It wasn't 3 anymore. It wasn't 10 or 13 or any number I could name. It was a current, a tide pulling forward, infinite. And I was drifting with it. I stopped eating. Hunger was pointless. The chant filled me fuller than food ever had. I stopped sleeping. Dreams and waking had blurred together anyway, both thick with numbers. My body was withering, but I felt no weakness. I felt hollowed, prepared. I realized the curse hadn't been killing my family randomly. It had been building. Each death was a notch in the wood, a stroke in the tally. Each life taken was one more step towards sum total. In me, I wasn't just counting. I was the chalkboard, the ledger, the thing carrying the sum until the math was finished. I found myself writing constantly. Walls, floors, scraps of paper, even my own arms. Numbers in neat, endless rows. Sometimes they were mine, sometimes they weren't. Sometimes I'd wake to find new pages scattered across the apartment, written in a hand I didn't recognize. Sharper, heavier, gouging the pen into the page. One night I traced back through them and realized they weren't random. They were coordinates, dates, names. Each line an obituary waiting to happen. And the worst part? Everyone I checked had already come true. It wasn't predicting. It was recording. Through me. The counting grew too loud to contain. When I stepped outside, strangers slowed to stare at me. Once, at the grocery store, a woman clutched her cart and whispered, "Do you hear that?" before fleeing down the aisle. Children pointed and started chanting numbers without knowing why, their parents yanking them away. It was spilling outward, through my breath, through the air around me, through anyone close enough to hear. The curse wasn't following me. I was spreading it. I locked myself into the apartment after that, boarded the door, taped blankets over the windows. I told myself it was quarantine, that if I isolated, I could stop the spread. But the numbers didn't need walls. They seeped through the wood, the brick, the wiring. Neighbors argued in threes, their voices sinking to my pulse. Pipes groaned in sets of 7. Even the streetlight outside blinked in rhythm. The world wasn't resisting, it was joining. Then came the voice, not the counting, not the whispers, but something deeper. It spoke from inside my chest, vibrating my bones like organ pipes. The tally is almost complete. I tried to scream, but the sound that came out wasn't mine. It was layered, harmonic, a chorus of voices long dead. My father's among them, my uncles, my grandfathers. The curse hadn't taken them away. It had folded them into the sum. Every death had been addition, and now it was carrying forward through me. I stopped recognizing my reflection. My lips moved constantly, muttering numbers whether I tried to or not. My eyes seemed deeper, darker, as though something was watching from behind them. When I pressed my palm to the mirror, the reflection pressed back a beat late, like it wasn't me, but something practicing being me. That was when I understood. I wasn't the end. I was the rehearsal, the warm-up act for something bigger. The last page slid under my door at exactly 3 a.m. The handwriting was jagged, frantic, almost carved into the paper. It said only, "There is no final number." I laughed until I sobbed, the sound breaking into coughs. Of course there wasn't. The curse wasn't a sequence to be completed. It was momentum. Once started, it didn't stop. And I had given it voice. Now I sit here, writing this with hands that no longer feel like mine. My skin is cold, my pulse shallow, but the numbers keep flowing through me like water through a broken dam. I can't stop them. I don't think I was ever meant to. If you're reading this, you're part of it now, because the curse doesn't need bloodlines anymore. It doesn't need funerals or families. It only needs listeners. Every number you hear adds to the sum. Every time you think about it, you're tallying too. And when you dream tonight, you'll wake with the count already on your tongue. There is no 3. There is no mercy. There is only the number without end, and it is still counting.